Oh no, what happened here? I think we're live. Okay, good. um, Thanks for joining how to basically use AI to generate more conversations with your ideal customer. I'm Michael Devlano from Ops AI, and we are a AI startup like many others. Our focus is really upon one particular area, and we're evolving into others. But the most important thing, I guess, first of all, that you're going to ask is, who am I? And what we're going to talk about today. So first, I'll cover who I am and what Ops.ai is, and we're going to talk specifically around why cold outreach itself is tough and what I think the alternative is going forward, and how do you make friends essentially with your ideal customer, partner, or investor. And we want to talk about the key, which is I think new offers and a new message. So the first thing, I guess, about me, I'm CTO and I guess founder of Ops AI. I'm also the author of a few books, Automate and Grow and Form Your Own Pack. I've led dev on development of over 100 SaaS mobile app projects, as well as Salesforce integrations. I am also a Salesforce consultant with experience in HubSpot and other CRMs and a lot of marketing automation. In 2021, I was working as a CTO of a PE-backed company in the business funding space, and I've now founded Founders Pack, which is a community for startup founders building scalable ventures, and now Ops. So I built Ops, and really more accurately, I envisioned Ops and then had my designer design it and my team code it. But we built Ops really around a couple of problems that we wanted to solve. One was, how do we find people that look like our ideal investor or our ideal customer? And the second was, then how do we make it easier to have conversations with those people? The goal is really then to be the easiest way for us to generate conversations with our ideal customer or investor or partners. Those are all very effective means for outreach. And the initial focus has been upon cold outreach, using probably the hardest way to do that is cold email outreach, especially at any scale. And this is something that's very, very important if you have any sort of founder-led or sales team focused outreach. And I think we're seeing this in the market, right? Where we see SDRs, BDRs, those teams being scaled back significantly. And I think one of the primary reasons is because they can't get enough conversations with their ideal customer or investor, in their case, mostly customers. If you're a startup founder, you may also want conversations with investors. So how do you start conversations with enough investors that you can get your kind of 50 to 100 pitches and you need to validate and do a raise? And then partners, right? Partnerships are more and more important. It's a central theme to what I wrote about in Form Your Own Pack, where you form, amongst other things, a community of customers. You form a mastermind of advisors and investors, but then also partnerships. You find ways to work with other people that might have the same customer and complementary solutions. So long of the short of it, partner teams, sales teams, really under stress because they can't do enough activity to get to the inbox of their ideal client, and they're having a hard time getting people's attention. And now tools like Ops are allowing us to scale out to the point where you can have a lot fewer people getting the same number of conversations, because the tools are allowing us to get to a lot more inboxes. So how do we make Ops the best way to generate conversations with your ideal customer? Not just pitch and hope, not just shoot in the dark and then find opportunity as it arises, but to really say, look, these people look like my ideal customer. I want to make friends with them, so when that they know, like, and trust me. And that's really our goal. So really our theme is we want to use AI to automate workflows. We see a lot of AI being used to generate text, right? Like copy, and it's not always great. And we need human review of that, or we just need humans to be creative and think, differently like a human. If they think like a human and use AI to automate the setup and the campaigns and the outreach, that's really what we want. We want it to do the robotic things. That means that we're freed up to think. We're freed up to imagine, well, if someone receives my message, what's their response going to be? I think that's a big theme here when we're talking about conversational outreach. So this is really the theme of Ops, is we want to increasingly use AI to automate within Ops and using other tools, workflows. So for example, if someone's going to do cold outreach, it's fairly complicated. They usually have to have many branded domains. They have to, set up multiple campaigns. They have to research data, create segments, set up the domains properly so that they comply with new bulk sender rules. And then they have to manage all of these different campaigns and data and figure out what's working. So increasingly what we want to do is we know that there's certain repetitive parts in there that are very consistent. So make it easy to research inside of ops, build a data set, move it into a campaign. And then it's up to us to think about the messaging. And that's really what this particular masterclass is about, is conversational outreach, which is how do you open more conversations? And I have kind of a thesis on that and appreciate any feedback on it. And hopefully that is useful to you. If you are in the comments, by the way, normally I think we were trying to figure out, we did this by Zoom in the past. So in this case, we tried to do it by StreamYard. I'm not sure if that was the best way. Just comment if you prefer just jumping on a Zoom, or if you like watching this on LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitter. That would be really helpful for the future. All right, so ops, as we said, is great for finding data and then starting, in this case, email campaigns. We also use the data in ops for LinkedIn outreach campaigns. And then we're also using it in a lot of cases for Twitter outreach campaigns. And whether the data is already in ops or we build you a custom data set, ops is both the way you can search by traditional means, but you can also go to the marketplace and find curated data sets that might match your ideal client or partner or investor. Or you can always request that and we'll build a custom data set that is highly targeted for you and just put it into your marketplace for you. Now, a couple observations. One, not everyone needs thousands of leads a month. By leads, I want to distinguish this, right? Leads versus engaged leads. I think Alex Ramosi has a couple ideas in here that I stole. One is engaged leads versus regular leads. And I think that was a really good way to describe it. Leads, as we know it, is just data, right? Now you want accurate data and you want to have an ideal client profile or ideal investor profile so you can build accurate data, because the more accurate the data is on, well, is this the right, person at the right type of company that I would sell to or partner with or get an investment from? That's number one. Number two is, am I delivering the right message then to that person that's relevant, right? If there's a mismatch there, you're in trouble. So first of all, most companies probably need thousands of potential leads, just raw leads, but not necessarily engaged leads. So engaged leads meaning there's someone sees a message from you, it's relevant to them, and they respond, and there's an actual opportunity to explore. Maybe it's just a conversation. Maybe it's further along in the sales cycle. But most of us would be really happy if we had maybe one or two of those types of conversations a day. So how do you get 10 to 20 conversations with your ideal customer, investor, or partner? All right, I'm going to tell a quick little story to illustrate what was my epiphany on this. So I went to a trade show in Las Vegas with my wife, and I was really just a casual observer. And I made unlimited friends at this trade show. And the way is, you probably see a preview of this, is this. I walked around with my service husky. Really, it's a husky with a service vest on so that, there's no problems. And she's very well trained and behaves real well. And she's just exploring like us, going booth to booth. And what I found was everybody wanted to talk to the dog. And then everyone talked to me. So here's a, place where, normally people are suspicious of each other, even in person, right? You can imagine by email or LinkedIn or Twitter, however you're reaching out, that it can be even worse, right? But in person, it was the ultimate icebreaker. It was a total hack and unlock, because I booked by accident 22 sales calls for ops from this event, because people would talk to the dog. There was rapport built because they liked the dog, and they assumed because the dog is likable that I am likable. And so they know, they felt like, I had a cool dog, right? They felt like that they knew me because of my dog and they liked me enough and trusted me enough that then this consistently happened. They would say, well, what do you do? So I kind of brought them a benefit, right? I brought them an unexpected benefit. I brought a really nice dog that was kind of curious and had a lot of personality, was really well behaved, talked a lot, right? The dog kind of chats. It's a husky, and people like pretty things. And then just casually talking, wasn't really trying to push what I was selling. I was learning about what they were selling, and inevitably every single person that I talked to there, and these were vendors mainly. I didn't have a booth there. I was just going, booth to booth. They would say, they saw my badge and they'd say, "What is ops?" There's Akira actually has a pass at an event right now, but so basically they felt because of that icebreaker, that rapport was instantaneous. And that's what we're really trying to do. This was my epiphany that, hey, we're saying don't pitch in emails. And we're saying you can have an offer in an email, but what we don't do enough of is get creative around the person I'm talking to. A lot of times to get their attention, we're assuming they have a problem, and then it's hit or miss. They're like, "No, I don't really have that problem." You ever get a cold email and it's like, "Hey, you have this problem and we all know it's a problem and I can fix that problem." And you're like, "I don't have that problem." If you don't care enough to think through that, and it's very tricky to do that, right? You don't always know if someone has a problem. So you think you have to be a little bit more vulnerable and open. That was really what the epiphany was for me, was that people knew, like, and trusted me instantly because I brought value to them. I enriched their day by bringing something fun into the equation, something that, gave them the honor of hanging out with my husky. And it sounds silly, but it was crazy. Like, I was like, wow, everybody wants to talk to me. They said, "Here, we need what you're talking about," because they would ask me almost to pitch, right? So I brought value, and then they inevitably asked, they felt like, "Oh, well, what do you do? What's that company? What is it? I'm curious now." And that was kind of my epiphany. Now, wisdom says if you've done any type of cold email outreach in the past, or particularly last year, that this is dead. And I've heard this over and over, and I've always thought this. But we've had a really crazy year, actually, because there was bulk sender rules that came out from Google. But really, what I think the truth is cold email is dead. Being cold is dead. And obviously, not knowing someone is always the thing you have to overcome to turn a lead into an engaged lead. And sometimes you can do that just based upon having an offer that hits on at the right time with the right person. But why not make friends with people at scale? And that's really the idea that I'm trying to push right now and that I want to encourage you to do. And I'll give you some ideas of how you can do that. I think really this boils down to bad outreach is dead. Bad intention, with them, is always the question. It's like, well, what's in it for me? Or leading with a me conversation. If that's the way you're starting a conversation, then people are just not going to be interested in talking to you again, or even at that point in time. I think that's the case in person, but particularly by email, and it's easy for them to reject you by email. The problem is when you're rejected by email, sometimes they ignore you, other times they mark you. There's systems, obviously, that mark you as spam. So if you're sending it one to bad, the wrong message to the wrong person, that's bad, right? Or, like, wrong timing can be bad. So those are all things stacked against you that can damage domain reputation and can block you. You won't get to the inbox very often after that. And we've also had this kind of weird deliverability crisis where we've seen volumes on a given outbound domain drop. So now we got to be really, really good at this. In the past, there was best practice to have a domain and to have not just one domain, but 5, 10, 20 domains. And I think that's still the case with low volume per day. But what low volume was a year ago was about 200 a day. Now it's like 20 to 50 a day. So you still need scale. You need to do enough outreach. You can't be sending 20, 30 emails a day and expect any response with cold email. LinkedIn's a little bit different, and we can talk about LinkedIn as another channel. I think there's really 3 effective channels we'll talk about that this type of messaging applies to. So you can the type of message on each one is probably a little different, but the real key is, first of all, on cold email is these bulk sender rules came out. It said, if you're sending this many emails on a given domain, here's the rules. And we're seeing in best practice that 20 to 50 emails a day per domain is where we're kind of capped before we start getting into trouble. And by trouble means we can track inside of ops. Plus, when we add an outbound email address, we see a deliverability score, and that'll start dropping the more email we send. So to be safe, to keep domain assets safe, you keep the volume low and then you use multiple assets, if that makes sense. So these are kind of like lookalike domains. There's also messaging fatigue. There's a lot of things like sharing scripts, and I'm not going to share any scripts with you today. I decided not to do that. We can always help you with that. I'm not a copywriter, but what I am trying to do is encourage people to think. Think about be empathetic to the person receiving the message you're sending on the other end. And it's really hard to do that because you can't see their face. You're just seeing a bunch of records and a list that we create. But the culture that I want to create around ops is use AI to automate workflows, think like a human and write like a human. I think that's what we want to do. We can still use AI to come up with ideas. We can still prompt AI to write scripts. But I think that the more important thing is that we're opening conversations. If we have the right philosophy, this is going to work a lot better. So, number one, people in high value targets, CHROs, CTOs, CMOs, founders, even investors, there's a little bit of messaging fatigue because they see the same or similar messages over and over. And it's not a lot of originality. There's not a lot of personalization. There's not a lot of personalization that's relevant and not creepy. So those are all issues, right? So, and they get a high volume of these. We all do. So we just don't want to be another message that gets lost in that inbox. Our goal is we want to create as many friends with people that look like our ideal customer or investor every day. And the first thing is we just got to send no more annoying messages. And what do I mean by annoying messages? One is personalization we know is important. You can do some level of personalization at scale. The more assumptions you make about that person, particularly like we say, oh, tell them they have this problem. But a majority of people, I think a lot of times that doesn't work. I think if I'm telling you what a problem is and it's wrong, I'm more mad than I am happy that you emailed me. First problem. Anything that comes across as manipulative, we see tactics like, oh, I'm sending this again and you didn't respond, and hey, pushing this to the top of your inbox. And we see kind of these patterns, right? And they're kind of naggy. We make the wrong assumption about the person we're sending to. And frankly, this boils down to we also have a bad offer. Like in an offer for us, I'm learning more and more, an offer is, well, what's the outcome of this email, right? What's the call to action? But what am I offering for you to do something? And there's a Gong study that we'll highlight in this. And Gong's done some really interesting research on a couple of things, but the one is around the nature of calls to action. When you have a very narrow and specific call to action, it's perceived as risk of time by the person receiving it, for example. So this is a great example but if you just sell them on sending them something, and in a lot of cases, send them a custom video or an assessment, that depending on your audience, those sort of things, if it's a soft ask, or you make an offer that's specific and then you say, would you be interested? Something soft that's low risk for them to say yes or no to can be really effective, right? So what we want to do is we want to think of those types of offers, and the offer doesn't have to be your product, actually. It can be adjacent to your product, but you don't want to necessarily, sometimes you want to give away your product, and that's fine. But really what you want to think of is, what is the offer here? What's the point of this email? How am I going to message them so that they have perceived value in the conversation? And that's really what we want. We want a conversation. I got this email today. I thought I would include this. This is from MailScale. They're a provider of ours for setting up email addresses that we use for outbound. And I thought it was really poignant. So kudos to them for sending this out. The founder sent this out and it says, hey, stop scaring prospects. And he goes, I had a realization that 90% of the time copy sounds like I, right? We're thinking about us. I can do this. I can do that. I assume this. And so that's the first thing. And I love this. Unnecessary info, weak offer. And that kind of I thought, man, I'm going to include this. Zoom feels more interactive. Yeah, thank you. Next time maybe we'll go back to Zoom. I was kind of scrambling a little bit. Sorry about that, if that's a problem. Lots of text is verbose. I hate getting an unsolicited email that's really, really long personally. I want you to get to the point. And if I see value in what you've offered, and maybe the offer is just hey, you look like my customer. I'd love your feedback on this thing. We'll talk about a couple of different creative things you can do depending on the audience. And so again, I'm not going to give you scripts on this. I could have done that. And if you want that, we can send out some ideas in a future post maybe. But I think the most important thing is I want you to think differently. I want you to think empathetically about the person receiving this email on the other end. We work very hard at the blocking and tackling to, set up branded domains, warm up email addresses, send out enough volume, the reputation stays fine, so that why? I can get the message in the inbox, but then we like run out of steam a lot of times. And so what I want you to really think about is, well, every email I send has some sort of an inherent offer. It has something that is a proposition in a sense. Is it just to be friends? That can be most effective. It might be the long game, right? It's like, by the way, never use, there's always trigger words, right? So you got to think of this like, when I get an email that says, oh, I'm expanding my network, or I want to add you to my network, network comes across as very transactional, right? It's quid pro quo. And what I want to start thinking about is, don't fill someone's inbox with random information unnecessarily, trying to overwhelm them. That won't work. They have the power. It's their inbox, right? So respect that. And what a strong offer that's hard to refuse is that he said it exactly bang on. A relevant case study that appeals to the prospect. That can be very effective, right? But usually this is something you ask for permission for. And I think that's what we want to think about. It's like, okay, I've invaded your inbox a little bit. How do I build rapport with you now? It's like I showed up your door, but how do I make you like me? That's kind of what you want to think of. Malcolm McLaren also said this: the medium is the message. I just want to say, Ops is optimized for like the data. We can use it for cold email outreach. LinkedIn outreach, as we know, is very effective, but not scalable. Like there's really tight limits on LinkedIn outreach. And then Twitter we're discovering can be very effective for DM campaigns. And you can also be a very good source of data where you can cross-reference someone's audience. You say, hey, I wish I had that audience. We can take that, scrape it, and match it to ops data and create a custom data set. Can be very useful. All of these too can be very useful as reference data to build a targeted list that makes sense, right? Like there's very up-to-date data on LinkedIn about who is where and in what role and in what seniority and what size of company. And Twitter, there's very relevant data that you can kind of say is intent data in a sense, where if I'm interested in this thing, I'll give you an example. Some of you might have come here, some of you might use Smart Lead, and we created an integration between Ops and Smart Lead, in addition to Ops Plus, our white label product from Smart Lead. And basically, what we did is we targeted people in the sense that we didn't really like target them individually. We said, hey, we both follow Smart Lead or the founder of Smart Lead. We think we're the easiest way to create campaigns. We're looking for partners. Would you give me feedback? And those types of campaigns can be really effective. And the data in Ops can be very effective. And custom data that we put into Ops for you specifically can be effective, where we can scrape an audience, enrich it with B2B emails. So I'll just mention that. And that's very, very important, right? One is the medium is the message. So there's different types of messages on each of these, but the theme, the conversational goal, that's what I want you to think about. So again, we want to use generative AI less for writing, less for thinking, more for automating these mechanics that are really annoying. And that's what we're trying to build increasingly is you tell Valet, our co-pilot in Ops, to just, hey, create a list with these parameters. Create a campaign targeting this list is what we're building out right now. And then we got a whole roadmap of similar things where we're using generative AI to generate the mechanical things that we're using many tools for. I'm making you the expert in many tools, and there's a steep learning curve. And this, I think, is what killed sales teams, by the way. I think salespeople, according to another Gong study, which is really interesting, says 80% almost of their time, I think it's like 77% of their time, is spent screwing around with SaaS. We want to get away from that. We want them to have conversations. We want you to have conversations. So what we think of as generative conversational outreach can be multiple channels, and I think this is really important right now, is to use Ops to create your email campaigns, use the data to do LinkedIn outreach, and then think of how we can use Twitter outreach effectively, potentially in your B2B channels or as a B2B channel for you. So here's what I want you to start with is, how do we make more friends at scale? One is we want to be different. And we're going to talk a little bit about what I think different means. And it can mean different to you. I think you have to decide this, and I'm going to give you some ideas and frameworks. Personalization is important without being creepy. So that's knowing your customer, right? And understanding them enough. There's that book by Napoleon Hill, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And there's something to the effect of the sweetest sound to someone's ears is their own name. So that's the first level of personalization. The second is, well, where are you? If I know those two things, it implies that I've done a little bit of research. Sometimes if I go beyond that, in my opinion, it can be a little creepy. You're like, man, are you following me? We don't want that effect. We just want them to know we're thinking about them, even if it's in a scaled way and it's not like formula. Now, we've a formulatic way. Maybe it is, but it doesn't seem that way. We want to offer value without ask. We want to be authentic. So I think when we talk about different is, you've got to think about a little bit, who are you? Not just the company or product you're representing, but if we're willing to be authentically us, bring ourselves into this and be genuine, I think that's going to start coming across in how we write and how we ask people for their time, and get away from asking that's for you, but offering, if that makes sense. That's where we go back to offers, right? I'll make this point too, which is we live in a hybrid world for work now, right? People are working at home. They're not dressing up every day. They're out of the bubble of the office more and more. They're in a home office in a lot of those scenarios. The live work barrier is broken, right? And what we all hate is messaging that is terrible, that isn't right. And we have a way to respond to it now, right? We hate marketing and sales speak. We want to actually, in this age of automation and AI, we're all a little fatigued at robotic thinking and language. So think in terms of conversational outreach. So as we said, it starts with the data, know your customer, make sure you're defining who your ideal customer investor is, and then find records that match that. And records mean people on the other end of that. Where are they? What size of company? What industry? Anything we can get beyond that to, who else they know, what their interests are. And I mentioned, for example, Twitter, like if you're following something on Twitter, it's relevant to your offer, that can be very useful, right? That can be useful for you just to have the right data. Because if I send a message to a person and it's the wrong message to that person, they're going to get mad and reply. They're going to mark you as spam and quietly go away, or they're just going to, kind of laugh at you behind the email box. And I'm sure we're all having that happen sometimes. I'm definitely not an expert in that, but I'm trying to be. First line personalization of any of your messaging. So when you are writing, think in terms of first line personalization. You mention their name, reference their company, maybe say something that's rapport building. And rapport building is like, hey, I've worked with companies in X industry, and knowing their industry can help. Be careful though, because a lot of the data on this is really, really bad because it relates to SIC codes and they're horrible. So you gotta be careful. You gotta look at the data and see, is the data really that good on that? And actually industry is very tough, but you can generalize it in your messaging. It's like, hey, I reach out to founders in the software industry and I've dealt with XYZ company, thought you kind of look like that. Those are types of personalization that can be helpful. You don't want to be verbose about it. You don't want to be gushing over someone. That's not really the point of it. It's to how can you make a rapport building statement that's short and gets the point across. Also, saying data is very important. We only want to, in any of your email campaigns, we only want to message business emails. So a real domain, a branded domain, someone at that domain, as opposed to Gmail or Yahoo email addresses, because there's different rules in those bulk sender rules. I'll just mention that. Like if 0.3% of, I think it's 0.3% of people, and if you're sending a bunch of Gmails, that's classified as, in the bulk sender, it's like B2B versus B2C, if you will, right? That other classification where it's personal emails, if 0.3% of them say you're spam, your domain's fried. There's a lot more leeway with business to business email. And then secondary data verification can be important. Sometimes that's enrichment credits that we spend to say, is this email address good? And we'll get varying degrees depending on which tool we use for that. Response. Sometimes some of them are very, very conservative. and you're blowing out like half your email addresses for no reason, and maybe you just bucket them differently, like you create different campaigns is one idea. But I keep saying the data because the message going to the right message going to the right person is really important. So making sure the data is correct is really, really important. And then, what's the philosophy? Our philosophy is make friends with your ideal customer investor. We want to get away from just pitching, but we do want offers. If I can distinguish between those two things. Pitching is, have you ever seen The Simpsons where Bart Simpson's like, I am so great, and he's walking around with a pot on his head and he's banging, I'm number one. This is where that other email that from my counterpart at MailScale sent out said, unnecessary info, unnecessary weak offer, right? He says, look, we just want to be really straightforward. We want a strong offer and reference that you've had success with someone else through a case study. It's not that you give them the whole case study. You can offer the case study. That's a really good example, right? And you experiment with it. You figure it out. So know your customer, make sure the data is correct, and then figure out how do you open conversations that are friendly and don't worry about what you're selling, right? Give. Actually, I have a slide on this down here. I should probably move that up. I'm going to move it right there because I think that's the key. How do you give status or enrich the other person? That's the way to think about it. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to give them stuff, but I have seen offers like that where I get an offer. It's like, hey, I kind of don't like them because they're like, I'd like to buy you. I can ship you DoorDash if we can talk. Stuff like I've seen offers like that to CTOs in particular. CTOs must be really hungry or very, very full. I don't know which one it is because when I have CTO as in my company in a different industry, I would get all these emails. It was like, can I buy you coffee virtually? Stuff like that. That seems a little weird to me, right? I wasn't really into it, but it does illustrate that you're trying to enrich the other person in some way. I believe a lot of people probably responded to that. Doesn't mean that there's a sincere connection though. And I think that's the issue. So you want to be really careful with that. You want to think of how you give status to the other person. And I'm going to give you 20 examples of what I think are potential. Some you might think are better than others. I think these are just ideas. And some of them have worked really well for us and for our clients, by the way, of ways to start a relationship at scale, if that makes sense. Advisory. Lifetime deals can be really beneficial. It's like, hey, I have this opportunity. I only have so many I can give out, but I would do it for you if because I really value your feedback, and you'd be a great lighthouse client for me. Stuff like that can be really, it's giving them status in a sense, right? So that could be the offer. Private groups, VIPs, and I'm going to go through the 20 really quickly for you in a second. Asking for help or feedback, especially if you're in a startup mode or even a new product or a release, or you have a problem that you think they can answer the question. If you phrase it like that, that can be very, very effective to opening conversation. Offering help can be there, but if they don't need the help, then you're kind of like hit or miss. Sometimes that's an assessment or a tool, or maybe it's something they're paying for that you're willing to give them for free. Like if you were paying for, I don't know what a good example of that is, but I think in terms of, well, my product is adjacent to this other product. The other one I can give to you negligibly, and it would be actually a good cost of acquisition. Sometimes you might come up with that as your offer. How can you offer your ideal client something that boosts their profile or reputation? And I'll show you a couple ways that we've done that. And it's sincere, like we're investing time and energy to do this in a scalable way that's really interesting. Maybe it's an introduction of someone to someone else. That's a little bit less scalable sometimes, unless it's like, you have to think about that. But the offer might be, hey, I recently connected these two people and you kind of look like them. Is there a similar connection that I can make for you in my network? That might be interesting. That also might be really presumptuous and people just like, no, go away, I'm busy. So again, I think what I want to encourage you to do is, rather than using like a set script that I give you or a formula, is to think through these ideas and come up with one. What's your unique messaging as a founder or a salesperson? Because a salesperson in a lot of ways is a founder or a marketer. What is the thing that you fix or do, or what's your expertise? And then how can you help people? That's great. think in those terms, and then think of a non-threatening offer. And that's really what we want to get to. And there's this theme out there, if you see this, and there's some guys that are really leading the charge on this. One is Adam Robinson from RB2B. We actually just put your pixel in our website. By the way, we're working on it. It's not up yet, but we're working on it, Adam. He's done a really good job where he's putting out daily LinkedIn content that's high value. And I see there's a lot of other guys I know, like Jason Burke. I know you're doing a lot of this. Shareable content sometimes, build in public content, subject matter expertise, everything from screw ups to wins in public. He's doing it all in public, and it lets people, if they receive an outreach message from your company, and the first thing a lot of times they do is if you really make it easy for them to identify you, particularly if they send them to your LinkedIn, even if it's from email, they're going to check you out, right? There's like, well, this is a compelling offer of time or opportunity or a way to enhance my status. What's this company and who's this person? Those are natural things for people to check out, especially if you make it easy by including a link to a profile. Like maybe it's just a link in bio, right? That can be safe. So this inbound led outbound can be really important, where people can see your content. And if they get a message from you after seeing your content, this is actually an interesting thing you can do, where let's say you're getting traction on LinkedIn. There's a way that someone that likes a particular post, and I think this works on Twitter too, we can then grab that data and enrich it with our own, with like their identifiable information. And you say, hey, I noticed you were engaging with my post, is another way that you can do outreach. I think that's actually really effective. And that's kind of the concept of some of the website identification products, but we can do that on social in some cases. So if you're consistently putting out your story, that can actually be a way to gather leads. Or events. Like if anybody comes to this event, I have the ability to then go from just a lead to an engaged lead potentially. So it's an opportunity for us to figure out if we can help you out or not. All right, so it just boils down to give until they ask. So we've had like Gary Vaynerchuk talk about jab, right hook, where you give value, and then you go with the offer. And that can be fine. Or you make the offer non-threatening or beneficial, unusually beneficial. That can be really effective. Also, just like, someone like Alex, for example, is giving out free courses. He's giving out free content that's high volume, really high value. His goal is not to sell you something necessarily. He wants to find entrepreneurs who he can invest in. He's doing it for deal flow, right? Where he'll take a stake in your company and help you scale beyond a certain point. So, his philosophy was actually kind of interesting, and you have to be patient with it because, hey, I need deals, I need leads, right? But, by going for the kill versus, hey, I made this thing, would this be a value to you? The thing might be a course, it might be a research study, it might be scripts, it might be free data that you think would match that person. It just depends on what your offer is and your product, right? And the offer that leads to that product. But I think this philosophy is really inherent in conversational outreach. And again, I want to emphasize, how do you raise the profile or otherwise enrich your ideal customer or investor, right? Seem like a mature human. You're secure enough that you can send a short message that communicates that value, and get them to indicate if this is valuable to them and that they want it. And the value might be something simple like, well, here's 20 ideas. Okay, here's 20 ideas. And I can tell you some of these we've done very, very effectively. It might be as simple as creating an advisory council. So we've seen in HR, we've seen people that sell to CTOs, we've seen people that sell to founders, we've seen people even on like marketing, CMO, if that's their target audience, creating an advisory council of your potential customers. They don't have to be a customer of yours, but you want feedback on what, is this product good? Here's my roadmap. Is that right? Making someone an advisor, and maybe there's 10, 20, 30 advisors. That's okay. It is not your board of directors necessarily. And maybe you're recruiting for a board of directors. That can be another offer if you're willing to do that. But making an advisory council, like a customer advisory council, or an ideal customer advisory council. Distinguish those. Can be a very, very effective way to run something regularly. You'll get a high potential opt-in rate if you do it correctly. And the value is sometimes they just, depending on the profile of the person you're reaching out to, I've had them where they're like, can I put it on my resume that I'm an advisor? Can I put it on my LinkedIn that I'm an advisor? That can be a very effective offer. Free access to a premium feature. Maybe there's something that you're really like, I can't sell that. That's my, or I can't give that away. That's my premium thing. It's like, screw it, just give it away. Like, give it to them. The key is like, you want to create community and engagement, right? You want to create conversations with people and then get them to the point where they'll pay for something. So giving them access to a premium feature in your software or in your service can be really, really effective for your product, whatever. Feature them in a blog or podcast. Like, podcasting is a great way. If you have a podcast that highlights the problems and solutions that your ideal customer or partner or investor has, it's very non-threatening to say, hey, I'm wondering if you would be my guest on this. And you just sincerely go, you have 3 or 4 standard questions that you interview someone by Zoom and publish it to a Beehive newsletter. That can be a very effective way to make friends and do it without asking anything. And then publish and amplify that content, right? And it shows that you're engaged in that community of that ideal client or partner, right? Or even investor. Investors might be a little trickier, but well, you could do that. We've done that, actually, now that I think about it. Invite someone, have a regular or an annual, webinar or event and invite them to be a speaker. If you did 12 webinars a month and you're targeting, CMOs, and you're looking for CMOs to talk on your regular webinar series, or a regular maybe of a virtual trade show. I don't love those, but I think webinars can be really effective. Invite them to be a guest, right? Offer personalized marketing report. I see this a lot where people do some sort of an assessment, right? If you're selling a marketing service or software, maybe, if it's, let's say it's SEO related, maybe they need an assessment of their website. Maybe you're selling CRM. That's actually a good idea for me. Maybe I should try, which is, are you having problems with data? Are you having problems with automations? Like, offer a personalized report or assessment. That can be very, very effective. Provide a case study or success story. This can be effective in the sense of, hey, we did this with that company or person, right? It's like, maybe your offer is like, you make a rapport building statement. It's personalized in your messaging. And it's like, can I send you this case study that we just wrote and get your feedback on it? Something non-threatening. And they may say yes or no. They may say nothing. But you might have enough at volume where people are, yeah, send it to me. And I've seen that be very, very effective, actually. Creating and inviting people to a VIP networking event. If you're targeting, CHROs, why not have a regular networking event? Maybe it's in person, maybe it's virtual, and invite them to that. It's like, hey, we're looking for particular people that fit this profile. You look like it. Would you be interested in attending? That sort of messaging can be really valuable. You're not at the point where you're pitching and selling, but you're trying to open that conversation, right? Again, free consultation or assessment. You got to be careful how you word this, but something that's literally no strings attached. If you did 30 assessments of someone's, I don't know, ad campaigns, right? Like, let's say you're selling, really boils down to funnels and ads for a particular segment. Let's call it e-commerce. And you're reaching out to e-commerce founders. You're saying, hey, can I offer you a free assessment of your ad campaigns? I don't know, how are they working well? That can be a great example of something that's going to open a conversation. You're enriching them, you're giving them value, and you're likely to get a pretty good response. Share industry insights. If you have really good research, or maybe you buy research, maybe you bought research that people want, and you say, hey, I'd like to give you access to this, and we're going to do a roundtable on it, or a webinar, or I have created my own summary of it, my own deck explaining what that findings are, so they don't have to buy the research, because there's paid research out there that can be really valuable in certain industries. That can be very useful. Proposing a joint venture or partnership, you have to be prepared to follow through with that. And partnerships can be very, very effective offer when it's legitimate, right? You legitimately want a reseller, or you have the same customer in a complementary product, and proposing that actually probably gets a very high response on both LinkedIn and email for sure. I haven't tried that on Twitter, but those other two channels for sure. Oh shit, it's not true, because we did outreach on Twitter for DM for ops, and we got a very good response rate. And part of it was the right audience, it was a related product, and we were saying, hey, we're looking for agency partners, and we got a very good response consistently with that, where people were booking time with us. Offer to review their product or service. So excuse me, talking a lot here. 12:48, so I'll speed it up a little bit. Just make sure we stay within the hour. If someone has a product or service, and giving them feedback on it or publicly reviewing it, that can be really effective to say, hey, I was going to review your product or service. Would you like the feedback before I post it? That could be interesting, and do it in a non-threatening way. So you got to think of the language, but that can be really effective. Inviting someone to co-author content with you. It's like, hey, I'm writing on this topic. You seem like you're an expert in it. I'm looking for a CHRO, a CMO, CTO, whatever the title is, founder in this industry, and you look like that. Would you be interested in co-authoring this with me? And that's when you're collaborating on something, that can be a really effective way to start making friends with someone that looks like your client. Provide personalized introduction to your network. I really am very, very careful about this term network. I think you want to think in terms of, yes, an introduction to someone that might be of value, but you got to really think about, how do I figure that out in the data so that it can appear in the campaign and it's correct. And I think I mentioned wording around this. Like, maybe you say, hey, I introduced so-and-so before, and they had a really interesting discussion, and I'm actively wondering if you would like to meet someone in my network. It could be as simple as that. And then you do a call and figure out who the person is. And you're like, why the hell would I do that? I'm trying to sell. But that's your ideal client that you're offering that to. You're going to know, one, if you're giving them that value of meeting someone that's important to them and solving a problem. Maybe it's you, or maybe it's someone in your network where they're trying to solve a problem unrelated to your product. But then it kind of opens it up. So at some point, you're building up a bank account, in a sense, like a psychological bank account. I don't want this to be manipulative necessarily. It's more like you're legitimately investing in that relationship. Is that the best way to describe it? Propose a content swap. This can be really effective. Invite them to join an exclusive group or forum. Just make sure it is exclusive. Maybe there's a guest speaker you secure that they might be interested in, and it can be virtual. You get a really good speaker and say, hey, I can only bring 100 people to this. I'm looking for, founders in AI startups to listen to, whoever, right? It's Sergey Brin. Mark Andreessen's going to speak at this thing for me. Oh, that's not out of the question. You never know. Propose a content swap, right? Like, hey, I'd like to write an article for your site. It's kind of an SEO tactic, but it also can offer value, because getting good content, like we're seeing a lot of AI driven content, and some of it's pretty decent, but there's definitely, you can tell, just like your email scripts versus articles, you can tell when there's a human behind it. Complementary product or service sample. This can be effective. Just be careful how you're doing it. Again, you want to maintain the value of what you're offering, but maybe it's an outrageous offer. Like, maybe it's something crazy. Invite them to participate in a research study. Say, hey, look, I have this hypothesis. I want to talk to people that are in X position and in X industry. You look like that. Would you be interested in being a part of it? And legitimately do the thing, right? It's adjacent to what you're selling, obviously. So I get where we don't want to like blow time not selling, but we're just trying to have enough of these high value relationships and conversations that you can then have permission, in a sense, to get to that point. Offer customized training or workshops. This can also be really effective. So I guess it depends on your industry and who the target audience is and what they would be interested in. And especially if it's like customized to them, maybe you need to just do a 15-minute discovery with them to fill in the blanks of how you customize it, right? That could be really interesting and effective. All right, so hopefully those are 20 really useful ideas for you. I just want to go back again, in each of these, there is an inherent offer that's not necessarily your product, but it's adjacent. It's really a value that's going to either raise the status or enrich your ideal customer or your ideal partner or your ideal investor. Now, investors might be a little different, like where you can just say, hey, look, they're just trying to find good companies, right? You probably don't necessarily have to jump through hoops so much. And I think there's, I don't know if this is the approach we would take with investor campaigns. So I will qualify that a little bit and say investors just want to know that, you're networking with people they know, right? Because again, it is status. So it is status. I just don't know if these particular types of offers would be most effective for investors or probably more effective for customers or potentially partners. I put this video in with Alex Hormozy. Obviously, he built like a big gym launch business. I think that's what it's called. Is it called Gym Launch? But I just like the video if you watch it. He talks about what I read, and I just found a video that matched what I read, which was around give, give, give until they ask. I was talking, and if you get the book Jab, 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 Right Hook, that's Gary Vaynerchuk's take on this, which is give value, give value, give value. Once you've given them 3 or 4 things of value that are legitimately of value, and they kind of inherently agree there's value. Maybe it's a course, maybe it's like scripts, maybe it's like an adjacent product, all the stuff we've been talking about. Then you have the right to ask, well, here's an offer of my product, or, here I want to sell you something in a sense, like not, without being so blunt. But this basically just talks to this, see if it works.
Reputation is the best thing that you can have. If you have given enough to people, you will already have earned their trust so that you don't need to sell. They will just say, I want to work with you. And you just accept it and you say, sure. The give, give, give first until they ask is the long-term strategy that compounds unto itself, because your business will compound as a result of the goodwill that compounds in the marketplace. Whereas if you have a sales-driven org, the only way that that business compounds is if the sales guys compound in their recruiting on your behalf, rather than because if they have a great product, they have a great sales system.
There you go. And so that's what we want. We want the give, give, give until they ask, or give, 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 then ask. Either one of those, whatever resonates with you, to really drive our campaigns. And that's, to me, what generative conversational outreach is. We use generative to automate the workflows and all the mechanics and the tactical stuff. And then as humans, we write and we think about how the offer that we're making is resonating. And then we read the data that comes back from the campaigns to see if that's true. I just want to say a couple of things around this trend that I was mentioning before. And again, check out Adam Robinson, check out Jason Burke's content. There's a bunch of others that I've been following just to kind of learn what they're doing. Where your content, this actually should say your content equals your story. That's probably more accurately, right? So it's like, you want your content to be and I would say 3 pillars, right? So you're writing outreach, but you want to support that outreach by also, and we're starting to do this with ops. You'll see the content we're putting out. We're trying to put out thought leadership content. We're putting out build in public or founder story content, like your founder brand. And then we're also putting out stuff that's like, bring your authentic self. You're working on things, you have things you're interested in, share that in a business setting, because I think that live work barrier has broken. So the content on LinkedIn is getting better recently because of this. Right? Not in spite of it. And some people share politics, which I'm not like a fan of, but there's something to be said about that too. Like, give people knowledge for free, for example, like offer to sell them the tools after. Like this is another great example where you see people putting really good detailed courses, frameworks, playbooks, that type of content where they opt in and get something. That can be a really effective part of an offer. Copywriting, we want to be careful how we compliment people, but it does help. It doesn't, at least you want to show you're paying attention to what they're doing, whether it's an article they post, like, hey, I noticed you post this article, I really enjoyed it. You can get data on when people get funding. That can be effective. You just have to be careful how you're doing it. Like, think again, what's the creep factor of this, right? Call to action, obviously, we always want some sort of an offer and then an action, a CTA we want them to do. I mentioned that case study from Gong, and I can always send it later in a follow-up email from this, where there's risk in the ask. So the more time and money that's perceived that you're asking for, the less likely someone is to say yes, and the more creeped out they're going to be. So a question-based call to action versus setting up a meeting, for example, which is interested versus, hey, can we meet Tuesday at 3? I would actually, my wife would say that she would get enterprise sales guys when she was a CHRO. They would just literally book into her calendar. Like that's kind of obnoxious, right? So you got to think of where is this um, offer and the call to action on the creep scale, right? Did it mean I had to do some creepy search and people are going to perceive that's really creepy? Or is it, oh, that was really thoughtful. That was interesting that you recognize that I wrote that article or I appeared on that podcast or I made this comment. And sometimes there's ways to build that data pretty effectively. You don't necessarily need to go to that extent, but if you have really high value portion or a segment of your targets, then it's probably worth it to build that sort of data. Long versus short emails, I prefer short. I think long form is for after someone's engaged in your story. Like, I would feel more comfortable if you received a long form story from me after you've been on this webinar, for example, right? As opposed to, I just out of the blue send you a long form email, might seem a little weird. It might work. I don't know. I'm not a genius copywriter, but I'm a decent writer. I've written a few books and I can write emails, but sometimes I'm not always able to put myself in the other person's shoes, but you got to really think through that. Subject lines, obviously, to get someone's attention, you've got to think of I think personalizing in the subject line can be very effective. Hi, John, interested in this. And it's like, it leads to, it's a hook to the short message in the body that can be really effective. And in all this, you want to create a bunch of subject lines and messaging that's consistent with an offer and a call to action that you test. So you create, segments of data, you send it out, see which ones get the most opens, which ones get the most replies, and then double, triple, quadruple down on the ones that do that are effective for you. Pastor is an interesting framework, to tell your story, by the way. So when you're creating your content, and it can influence all of your email stories long-term, especially for engaged people. So maybe your initial email is, here's some way to enrich or raise the status of the person I'm messaging. They bite, they get into it, you deliver, then they've opted in to your story a little bit more. And then you can open up the kimono, so to speak. Here's a way to tell that story, which is, there's a person, or this is actually a way to framework the story of what you're offering, actually. So that's probably better. And you can do this is not necessarily one email or post, but this is how it's kind of like a messaging framework over time to tell your story. Is that the best way to say it? Yeah. There's a person with a problem in the world. If that problem has never changed, and this is the person you're talking to that you're identifying, say, hey, are you this role, this type of company? Are you a founder in an AI startup? And this thing is really hard and a problem. If that never changed, what would things look like? And then telling the story with your case studies or examples of, well, here's someone that had that problem and here's the solution. And then here's the story of what life was like after the solution. And the solution is probably something that you offer. And then giving them that thing, the offer that we talk about, and then the call to action, which is the response. So this is just a framework I wanted to share with you. So all of this boils down to give until they ask, or give, then ask. Show them the secrets to what you do. Show them the thing that makes you so special. Show them that they could even do it themselves, but then offer to do it for them. Whether that's as a service, a product, or your software. Being vulnerable can be really effective, right? Like, what are your interests? What's your backstory? How did you come to this position? What's your encounter with someone in the world? What's something that's, in your personal life that's an interest for you that you invest time in? Who do you really respect? Who are your role models or mentors? I recommend The Founder Brand. It's a great book that I think influences a way that you can tell your personal story. So again, having that content for maybe the next stage after you've had generated a conversation, or your public content on LinkedIn and Twitter, being within the theme and the pillars of your themes that are consistent with your outreach can really help, especially if they go check you out. Show them the secrets. I was on a webinar from my friend Jack yesterday from Jabroni Capital, where he's got like a fake Sorry, not to call it fake, but fake VC, where he pretends to be like the worst VC in the world, like the most obnoxious, terrible venture capitalist. And he's just over the top ridiculous. But then people will hire him to be their venture coach, right? To raise money. So being ridiculous, like, make things entertaining in a circus, and being gutsy like that. I have a little problem with this sometimes, but sharing, he said, I stole these slides from him, Jack, so I hope you don't mind, because I thought this was really, really good points. And check out Jabroni Capital, subscribe to it if you haven't, and check out his LinkedIn content because it's really unique. Opinions make you interesting. Sharing a spiky point of view, something that's maybe a little controversial, will help you authentically ruffle feathers. And he gave some examples of this. One was Sean Purry, who, when Clubhouse was on the come up, he said, no, it's going to fail. People were like, what? This is the greatest thing ever. So it was a little controversial, right? Going on a limb. Jack had this, this type of like, I hate this thing. I hate this thing in my industry. I hate this product. Picking a villain can be really, and you're the hero, or maybe being the villain, I think is what Jack's angle is, right? Just be better. Like, say that, you're better than what the status quo is, and here's why, and challenging them. That can be really effective. Picking a fight in public, that can be really effective. So these are things like in your content story, and they can influence your outreach. Maybe you're delivering value by being bold. That can be, maybe that's part of what you decide is your brand message as a founder or a salesperson. Mechanics. So I won't get too much into this, but these are still the best practices. We still want branded domains that are warmed up and low volume per, and managing the reputation of these. This is still very, very important to the mechanics of getting to the inbox, having really good data that matches your ideal client profile, really good in the sense of it's the right target audience, through search that's like industry, title, geography, but then also, is it accurate where they're at? Is the email information accurate? Is it verified? So that we don't damage the domain reputation by getting a lot of bounce backs, for example, or sending a lot of messages that don't resonate. And this is just an example of how you can find data inside of Ops. And if you'd like to try out Ops, I would love your feedback on that. We do have a data marketplace where you can find curated data. So if you don't necessarily think you're finding the data, but you say, oh, no, I want to this is my ideal client. I want to find companies that are funded by Andreessen Horowitz, or I want to find, titles in an industry. The data marketplace is a great place where you can find pre-curated data sets. And the data is super, super important. So again, just going back to the mechanics of that, find great data, create messaging that's conversational, and then automate it, right? And scale it up when you find things that are working. So curated data sets, small batch, reach the right person's inbox with the right message. That's really what it boils down to. We have integrations to Smart Lead now. So you can, from data that you've researched, create a campaign from that. And we're just in the process of updating Valet, which is our chat bot. So we're using AI to automate the workflow, not necessarily the messaging. Or I'm contemplating, we're testing, can we create conversational outreach with AI? And I think we can at some point, but really, I think you want to free your time up from doing all the gobbledygook of automations and setting up assets and managing them as much as you can. And that's really what we've invested in. And then I want you to invest your time and energy in writing great messages to the right people that you want to talk to. So that's basically the Ops Plus platform. And you'll notice it also looks like Smart Lead. I won't get too much into that. All right. So to summarize, thank you so much for joining. I went a little bit over 3 minutes. If there are questions and you ask them, I will see them and I can respond to them. So you're welcome to do that. I got one person that responded that Zoom feels more interactive. And I totally get that. So if you do have a question though, and you ask it in chat on LinkedIn or on Twitter, I should see Twitter as well, but definitely I'll see LinkedIn and I can answer those now. I will follow up to everyone that did register and attend. And it looks like there's been over 20 people on this, which is great because we did this very last minute. We're going to do this weekly. We're going to go on the limb and do this weekly where we try to continue to build this culture of conversational outreach. We learned about how to reach specific audiences that you might be interested in. If there's content or if you're having struggles with campaigns or messaging or just trying to understand how do you set up outreach infrastructure, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to give you some time to give you what we've learned. And otherwise, I really appreciate everybody watching and joining this. There will be a recording. I don't know where. I think there should be a recording on YouTube, and then we'll repost that probably to LinkedIn. Thank you so much. There will be another. Let's see if I have the schedule here. We will have 3 of these. I think this is the first of 3 in August. So we're not taking any time off. Next week, we're going to talk specifically about conversational outreach on LinkedIn. So we talked today about conversational outreach, the philosophy in general, and we talked a little bit about how ops itself is really good for finding data and building campaigns for cold email outreach, which I think is technically, like, the technical mechanics of it is much more complicated than than LinkedIn, sorry, or Twitter for that matter. But so next week we'll talk about what the mechanics look like on LinkedIn, and how the messaging and the types of campaigns you can run to reach your ideal client or investor on LinkedIn differ. So next week, is it next week? Let's see. It's the 10th, August the 10th. So 9 days from now will be our next webinar. So if you can join us for that, that's amazing. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions around the mechanics or messaging in your campaigns. And if you want feedback on anything, I'm happy to give that to you. We want people to test ops. We have a great new version that I'm very, very happy with. It took a lot longer to get here than I thought. Sometimes I'm not that realistic about these things. The new version that we've built out is integrated to Ops Plus, which is basically the ability to not only have data, but also generate campaigns from that data. And then we've also made it so that, let's see, if I wanted to do my own message customization, but use your platform for everything else. Well, you are writing the messages right now on Ops. We're not generating the messages. That's why I'm trying to help you generate messages. That makes sense? And then a question about the API, what would you be sending from, is probably my question. If I wanted to use my own message customization, we use your platform for everything else. Just let me know what you would be sending it from. Like, where would you generate the message? And what I think that's what you're asking, which is you want data and campaigns, like the automation piece with all the email assets on Ops, but you want the message to be sent from something else. Let me know. But really, inside of Ops is Valet, and Valet is the generative chat, and that's the real customize each individual message. So, I mean, there's insertion fields that, the key is the data, right? Is the data got the customizations? So I don't know if I would guess I would just need to understand what your customization is. So maybe what you can do is feel free to DM me on LinkedIn. And if we're not connected, connect with me. I can put let's see. This is me. You probably know my handle here, but I think this sounds real specific. So I just would like to understand how you're customizing. Like, are you creating something? Oh, that's weird. Why would it send that on YouTube? That's weird. I don't know if you saw that, but M. Devillano is my, you can see you can find me there. Yeah, I think I just need to understand where it's coming from. And then we can figure out, do we need an API even? Like, do we need webhooks? Or is this something we just, enable you already? Because we do have generative chat inside, which is Valet. Valet is the generative chat. And increasingly, that's where we're building capabilities. Yeah, insert fields, right. The key then is the data. Does the data have, whatever field you're creating, like, are you generating a blurb that's based upon several data points and that's enriching the data, and then just insert that en masse? That's increasingly what we want to do. I think I just want to look at your specific use case and see if I can help you. Thanks. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Yeah, so we do want feedback on the platform, particularly the roadmap, because the next 4 to 6 months, I've got some pretty specific things in mind. I'm trying to come up with capabilities around Valet. So Ops, is a data marketplace where you can search for data or find curated data. I have a couple of additional customizations there. I'm thinking around enrichment and scraping. Beyond that, most of the customizations are in the generative chat. Because what I want this to be increasingly is, like, even selfishly, is right now I can use generative chat inside of Ops to say, create a list targeting this title, this geography, this industry, and it'll come back with a search result that's pretty much similar to what you would search in filters. And then I can create campaigns from that list once I confirm that I've acquired the records. And I can look at a sample, small sample, and then buy the rest of it, right? So that works now from generative chat. The thing we're building right now is create a campaign targeting a particular segment. So even though right now you're only pushing a couple buttons to generate a campaign, then you got to write copy for it and add your email assets. The next thing is, no, I'm just going to generate the campaign targeting that segment. And then I'm going to generate the campaign with some copy that you approve based upon the desired outcome is where I'm going with it, if that makes sense. So the stuff right now that I'm asking you to think about, I don't want you to stop thinking about it. I want you to continue to think in terms of, how do I open conversations with my ideal customer investor? How do I create offers that are enriching their profile? But I think I can teach AI to do that too, to at least get you a good start. And then there's the email assets itself. And increasingly over the next few weeks, we'll have the ability to actually set up, I think, domains and email assets inside of the platform. I think in the next month and a half, and then add those to the campaign. So you think about it, what would take us creating a domain, setting up all the DNS, moving that into the campaign, warming it up, because there's, reputation scoring and making sure that it's got a good reputation. I just want to automate that with a couple words, which is create a campaign targeting this segment, and I want this to be the outcome, and it gets me started. So I can scale up campaigns as I need that are relevant to the right audience, right? So we're getting away from all this manual automation stuff that we're doing. And then I just want feedback on the roadmap of, is this the right thing to build? And then what else? One thing I would like, for example, is I want some sort of integration to CRM, so I can pull data from CRM, but also send leads to CRM. So that's logical with words. Maybe I want to generate a report with words. Maybe I want, and not maybe I do, maybe I want when I have an opportunity, I can create the opportunity from chat, that same chat. It shouldn't be 12 different chats in 12 different places. I should be able to stay in Valet and do those things like the Wizard of Oz. I'm after that want feedback on a Stripe integration. How would that work? Which is, hey, if this deal goes to closed one, generate an invoice for me in Stripe. I would love that. Is it recurring or not? Okay, it's not recurring. Okay, cool. Or it's it's one time. This is how much it is and to who. Right? Those are the sort of things that I'm thinking of, where I think increasingly the value of Valet as a co-pilot for you is being built around automation and taking time away from mechanical things when you can focus on human things like writing and having conversations. That's what I want. All right, so I've talked a lot. I really appreciate everybody that joined this. I really appreciate the questions. If you have any more questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. There's my handle, Michael Devellano at ops.ai. Michael at ops.ai is my email. And I'm happy to answer anything or jump on a call and give you feedback on your campaigns or any technical setup problems that you're having around campaigns, or even CRM for that matter. Thank you so much. We will have the next webinar on the 10th. And please reach out and say hi and let me know your feedback on this. And we will send out a follow-up email to everybody as well. Thank you very much. Have a great day.